Got it.
So
Yeah,
the floor is yours, Suk.
wonderful. Thank you, Taylor. And I want to say that breakout room felt very short. I'm sure everybody has that experience every time. But no, thank you for creating this space, Taylor, for all of us to be able to connect with each other. A little bit background on myself. So I'm a user experience researcher. And just a quick show of hands, how many people are familiar with user experience research? Okay, I'll do a very quick demonstration that could clarify that. But before I do that, I want to give a very short introduction. So I've had a wild background, a wild career. I went to law school. I left law school actually because of a startup weekend that we won. And so I left law school to kick off that startup. And then from there, I got into medical office consulting, especially with optometry clinics. And then that transformed into more enterprise consulting. And that's where I started to transition more into user experience. And now I'm full on in user experience consulting. And I just wrapped a contract with a small company you may have heard of called Facebook. So it's been really interesting. And the kind of thread I would say that's connected all my experiences has been a fascination with how people connect with technology, because we have technology just accelerating. It just keeps improving at a rapid pace, and how people interact with that technology doesn't always keep up. I mean, sometimes we see, you might go to a hotel or motel and people are still using pen and paper when you have these pretty efficient systems online for them to be able to manage. So before I go into some cool things to share, I want to give a short demonstration. So I'm going to share just two pictures I think should get the point across. Okay, can you all see this picture? So I want to just tell a very short story. This is Jody. Jody's a young girl with big dreams. And probably biggest of all her dreams is a dream to fly. There were some scientists who wanted to, and her father's a businessman, so he wanted to help her to be able to fly. So I'm going to share another image real quick. Let me stop this, share another one. So her father wanted to help her fly and started to work on this problem. Can you all see this? There's two rockets on this. Okay, so this is basically the UX process. Her father, got his head down, put some money into it, and on the left side, you see what he wanted to build. There's a pretty advanced rocket there. There's artwork, you got titanium fins, nickel plated rivets. But of course, we all know the constraints of time and budget. And so they had to settle for the rocket in the middle. It's a pretty basic rocket. It's got the booster, the antenna and the cone, and the fins to make sure it can fly straight. That image at the end is what Jody actually wanted. She simply wanted a bike and a ramp. And that's how I describe user experience research, is the process of understanding what Jody actually wants, so you don't waste all this time and money building a rocket ship that she is never going to use in the first place. So with that in mind, any questions on that for more clarity on user experience research? Okay, so UX research is used quite a bit in larger environments. You have Facebook, you have Nextdoor, you have Google that spend a lot of money on user experience research. But in my experience, the ability to understand what people want is critical to helping your business grow. So I'm going to be I'm just going to get down and dirty, and I want to share a few ways to do some what I'd call guerrilla tactic research to quickly understand what people in your business are looking for. Before I do that, I did meet a few people in the kickoff room, but I'm looking for one or two volunteers to just share what your business is, just what industry you're in, and I'll have like one question for you. Do we have any volunteers? Okay, I saw Karthik first. Karthik, love to hear what you do.
We sell kits for chemists in R&D to attach molecules together.
So we've got a website where we sell direct to customer.
Okay, direct to the chemists?
Direct to the chemists in R&D, in biotech, yeah.
Okay, and it sounds like this is not something that exists already.
There are competitor kits, but we are targeting like a niche market within that hasn't been addressed before, yes.
Okay, got it. Are there any reviews for your competitors? Any review websites or magazines, anything like that?
They post their own reviews on their websites, right? Like they're really large companies. They're from like the 1920s. They've been around for a while.
Okay.
And then there's also other like review websites, like Biospace might be one.
Got it. Okay, great. Okay, Karthik, appreciate your time. And I want to, in the tips, I'll try to speak to your business directly. And then, is it Hallie or Haley?
It's Hallie. Hi. So I'm a service provider physician and looking for technology input for developing things. So customer surveys and outcomes are crucial for understanding how to offer what people need, but also how I am looking for how I can better deliver to a market that's transitioning and transforming, because telemedicine is a totally different sphere from anything that has gone before. And I'm really looking for how to revamp myself, not just an industry.
Absolutely. That is really fascinating. And one of the things that really interests me is in my work with optometry clinics that I did before, optometry was going through a transition where you had Target, you had Walmart getting into the business, and then you had people buying contacts and glasses online. And so you have doctors who've been in the industry for decades, who a lot of their revenue comes from glasses and contact lenses. So they have to transition their business. And the solution in that case was becoming more service providers, because there's not enough ophthalmologists to do those surgeries. So they could take on more of those surgeries, or not surgeries, but services, and be more of a service-based business rather than a product-based business. So fascinating. And I'm sorry, is it Hallie?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you both
Thank
for,
you.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for sharing your business. So regarding all this research, there's basically 3 different things that you could do, and these will apply differently depending on your own business or your own work. But one of the things that is most critical to any type of research you do is to try to remove bias. You want to try to get to a point when you're talking to people and doing this kind of research to where people are willing to share things with you that you completely disagree with. I think a good litmus test for this, especially in today's world, is to ask yourself how often you have a conversation with somebody who's on the politically opposite side of the spectrum from you. And how does that conversation go? Are they opening up with you about things that you disagree with? If they do, that's a really good indication that you are conducting the conversation in a way where people feel comfortable to share things that they might not normally share, which is critical in running a business, because people oftentimes don't want to share things that they can be nervous sharing things that they don't like during the experience with your business. So the other point about removing that bias is the goal with any of this research is to try to see the world from people's eyes themselves. So you want to put yourself in their shoes as much as possible. 3 specific ways to do this are to go online and to talk to recent clients and then disappointed clients. So in terms of going online, Hallie, I think this could be useful for you and Karthik as well. Those reviews, when you find those reviews, Karthik, I'm going to speak to your business specifically, that these companies are leaving, you want to look for both the good and the bad. What are experiences that they had that they did not enjoy? But also, what are they looking for in the types of service providers that they are currently working with? And Karthik, it sounds like you already have reviewed some of the reviews that they've left. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I'm curious about your experience in that.
Yeah, people definitely leave good and bad reviews. I mean, they tend to be very product focused. Sometimes they'll leave a review of the business in the review section, of course, for a product, right? So it's kind of the wrong scope. But yeah,
Sure.
they do leave some pretty candid feedback for the larger companies.
And what's something that stuck out to you? That was there anything that stuck out that you've brought back into your own business?
A lot of the guys who aren't happy are unhappy because customer service is just way too slow or way too hard to reach, right? So one thing we're thinking of is when we do, say, our email campaigns, right? We can be much more personal because we're a tiny startup. When we actually engage with our end users, we can like answer their questions if they ask us. Versus when I worked at the bigger companies, we couldn't do that, right? We didn't have direct access to our customers, and there was a lot more scrutiny of how we responded. So yeah, that's something I'm bringing back from the reviews.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one thing I would, I don't know if you're doing this already, but it may be a useful metric to introduce into your business in terms of time to be able to respond to a customer question. And you know, that people talk about KPIs. That's a potential KPI that you could introduce that's, you know, directly given to you by their reviews. So reviews is a powerful way to try to find what people are looking for, what they like, what they dislike. Another thing is to talk to people. Now, a few people have mentioned surveys, and as a user experience researcher, I'm very, very careful about using surveys. One of there's a number of challenges with surveys, but a few of the big ones is that when you're writing the questions, if you're not careful, your own bias is coming into the questions. Often surveys are used to try to confirm what we already believe, rather than trying to find and discover new needs that customers might have. Another challenge with surveys is that if you do get an interesting response, let's say you leave an open-ended question and somebody says something interesting, you lose that opportunity. Well, you can give someone a call, but there's not an opportunity in the moment to follow up with them and ask more questions to try to understand what people mean by some of those responses they're leaving. And that's where I think actually scheduling interviews with clients is absolutely critical. So two people that I think would be very powerful to talk with is a recent client. And again, you're focused on getting to know them and their world. So when you're talking with people, an example that I give is I was doing research for a web hosting company, and they want to find a way to kind of better get into the market and become more competitive. So I sat down with one of their potential customers who didn't sign up, and I just wanted to understand him and his work and who he was. He was a developer, a senior developer, and he started talking about really getting into the weeds and understanding the ecosystem of a hosting provider, which this small company, they're not a big provider. They're not like an Amazon. They're not like a Google. And the more that I talked to the senior developer, it became really clear that he needed a provider that can do more than just hosting. I mean, if you go to Google or Amazon, Amazon Web Services can provide all kinds of solutions for you. And so the company was not a good fit for him. And they would have had to pour a few $1 million into developing a pretty big solution. It would have taken multiple years to be able to get something that would even ping on his radar. And I found that out not by focusing on, hey, how do we make this service fit you? How do we sell you? But instead focusing on who are you? What does your day-to-day look like? And what are you looking for from a hosting provider? So speaking with recent or prospective clients can be absolutely critical. And the second is to speak with a bad customer, someone who was pissed off, who was angry, potentially even yelling at you, or maybe it's just simply a sale that you lost, somebody who decided not to go forward with you. Especially in this case, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking to try to reach out to somebody who's not aligned with you. And if somebody's angry with you, what I found to be helpful is to let them know, that you're simply trying to understand what their experience was. What I found is that when people know that we're there to understand who they are and what their experience was, people are a lot more open to sharing that. And if you make it clear, I'm not going to sell you anything, I'm not trying to win you back. I want to make sure that I understand what happened with you, so nobody else has that kind of experience again. People are usually willing to have a conversation and to open up about what really made them mad. Another thing that's critical here to understand is that when someone's leaving a bad review or a customer is angry with you to the point of potentially yelling at you, it's rare, but sometimes it can happen, or they just walk out and don't come back. Anybody who voices their opinion is a gold mine, because for one person who voiced their opinion, there are 10 people who did not and just left and will never see you again. So those people are a gold mine of potential information, provided they're willing to have a conversation and can share some of their experiences with you. And one last thing I do want to share is, in terms of baking user experience research into the culture of your company. One way to do this very specifically is to instill a sense of curiosity in everybody who's in your company, whether it's somebody who's picking up the phone or a service provider or somebody who's providing customer service, like in Karthik's example. One thing that could be useful is to simply sit down one day, spend 5 minutes, list out a bunch of questions that you're curious about, that you're curious to learn about from your clients, and then give your team one question for the week. That way you'll be asking all your different clients this one single question. You'll get a lot of different answers that you can then come back and compare and start to see patterns if and when they emerge. That also gives you a chance to test out different questions and to continually improve what you're asking and discovering from your customers. That is all I've got. Taylor and everyone, I hope that was helpful and here to answer any questions if you got them.
That was awesome, Sukh. Thanks. I was just taking some notes, and the last thing you said, I did have a question on. So I'll take the first question, but then everybody else, if you want to throw your questions in the chat or just unmute yourself, that would be awesome. But you said list out questions and then choose one that you give your team that they can ask in every customer interaction that week. When you've done that in the past, what are you thinking about in terms of that list of questions? Like, that seems very broad. So is there a way that you've narrowed down your kind of thinking on listing that question? And then how do you prioritize which question to give to your team to ask that week?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I'm a big advocate of whenever you're writing anything, to write crap and then make it better. So I mean, just right off the bat, just list everything, any question that might come to mind. And from there, you can start to edit questions down. In terms of what I'm looking for specifically, that's it. So like when I'm thinking of an optometry clinic, and in one particular example, I was really curious about these trends that I was starting to see in terms of people buying online and people, getting glasses while they're getting an exam. And so there, I was focused on asking questions about people's buying habits. Where do they plan on getting contact lenses? Or even why were they interested in buying online? Like, what about buying online made them interested? And from there, you can start to, because it's not so much the action, but it's the motivation behind the action that really helps. Because if they're interested in, we were actually able to win back some contact lens patients because some people really didn't like their online experience because they had to choose a contact lens on their own. Whereas when they came in, they could be guided and fit for a good contact lens that really worked for if somebody had dry eyes, etc. And we gave them something very, we gave them a prescription for a particular type of contact lens, gave them free samples, gave them solution that they didn't have to buy, and made it very easy for them to buy contact lenses. And we were able to do that because we were able to understand what drove them to buy online in the first place and try to replicate that in office. Very
cool. Thanks. A couple of questions in the chat. If Hallie and Karthik, you want to just unmute yourself and give any context to those, that would be great. Hallie, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, when you're using, Chimp or SurveyMonkey or other types of tools, if you're working in a data-driven company, it's great to have all these survey tools available. But a lot of people in this group, myself included, don't necessarily have those vast backgrounds and all sorts of tools already made. So how do you link up and what's the best ways to get the information together? And then once you've harvested the responses, how do you make the most sense and prioritize not just the questions, but also the action items that help you to drive what the experience means?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I want to say right off the bat, I rarely use surveys, and if I do use them, it's very specific. When I say very specific, it's usually we're already aware of, like I've done a lot of research and talked to people, worked with a team, with the data science team, and we've done market research and have kind of come down to to really understand what people. I'm trying to think of a specific example. I'm talking as I'm doing that, but I think it's better if I just think about it for a second. So one client that I worked with recently, it's interesting that there's two people that I met already who are working on kits, but we were working on kits ourselves. And this was to help people connect with others locally. And so in that sense, we were aware already that we wanted to do kits. We were aware that what the kits would facilitate. It was to be an activity to help people connect. And even what type of kits people would want, I got that from talking to people. And then the survey would then it would be about, that's where I think a survey would be useful. Which of these kits would you most likely to use or be most interested in? And even then, a survey is risky because people are willing to say what they'll do, but they don't always do what they say. And it happens so often. I mean, everybody can say, oh yeah, I want to do like a lemonade stand, for instance. But then they get the kit and then all of a sudden, they're too busy to do a lemonade stand. Whereas something like a pre-made scavenger hunt would have been easier to execute. So I would say a survey, well, you know what, let me ask you this question. What are you looking to learn from your survey? I think you're
on mute. I would love to talk with you more one-on-one, and I have some leads for you in terms of the optical stuff also. So I'm doing my best to keep this more general because I'm the only doctor in the group. But just, when you're talking about patient satisfaction, it's a very different thing from client and customer satisfaction because there are all sorts of different pain points, and the typical 4 questions of marketing go out the window. So how do you address things differently when you have a different user base from, and that's what I'm saying. I know that this is a different set of questions that I need to ask you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, happy to schedule time offline. A quick answer to that in terms of measuring patient satisfaction. I think the Net Promoter Score is a good, it's got a lot of research behind it. It's useful. It's a basically 1 to 10 scale, if I remember correctly, that asks the question, how willing would you be to recommend this business to someone else? And you're looking for an 8 and above. Anything below that is not as useful. And then below that, I might include an open-ended question. What did you love about your experience, for instance? Or what would you change next time?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thanks.
Cool, thanks.
Absolutely.
Karthik, do you want to shed any context to your question as well?
Sure. So I use Asana for managing my team, right? And on the top, they always have this little banner that says, one customer question, right? It might be like, would you use X feature? Something like that. Are you a fan of things like that, where it's, it's part of the UI, like they make it pretty mellow, but it's a nice way of collecting feedback if it works. I don't know if you've tried it. Does it work?
Yeah, again, I have like a kind of gut level aversion to that, like to a question like that, because I think it's a similar issue with the survey of would you use it is very different than, doing a screen. One thing that if you are interested in how people use, for instance, a website, is to schedule a Zoom session with one of your clients and give them a task to do while on your website, and just watch what they do. Don't give them any, don't make any suggestions, and just see and ask them to, vocalize what they're thinking as they're going through your website. That could be pretty eye-opening in terms of just simple things like navigation, where's somebody naturally gravitating to if they're looking for, let's say, learn more, or if somebody's willing to buy and they're having trouble finding the buy button. That's it's a big red flag. And it kind of, that can really prioritize what to do next. Just slap a big buy button right there in the middle. So yeah, hope that helps.
I'm going to plug Hotjar again, Taylor. I've mentioned it in the past. Super useful for the stuff like this. It just takes a video of your website and it shows you like where are people navigating and where are they clicking and how often.
Absolutely, I'll second that for sure. Taylor, I think you're on mute.
Hotjar's on the list of resources again. I like it. Sorry, just taking some notes there. This is awesome. If anybody has another question, we can kind of leave the line open until for the next couple of minutes, 11:50 maybe. But otherwise, Suk, this is awesome. I've taken a bunch of notes. I'll share them on LinkedIn, and if any of you have additional questions, please connect with Suk. What's the best way to reach you? And do you have any parting words of wisdom?
Yes, I will. I'm going to also link to my LinkedIn. I would say that's best. And parting words, I'm a deep believer in user experience research. I got into this because I see this as the way of the future in terms of, this is kind of a way to commercialize understanding who people are and what they want. And the more that we can do that, the more that we can deliver the very best that we can in each of our businesses and each of our service offerings. And I'm also a believer in practicing UX in daily life to really understand people, because I think we could use more of that in our day-to-day. So that's all I've got for now.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time. So this is fantastic. I know a couple of people had mentioned that they wanted to reach out to you and talk to you. Priscilla is one. She's online. I think I connected you via email, but yeah, really appreciate your time. Thank you. And everybody else, have a great week, and we'll see you next week.